Anyway, let's be done with that one. Okay. Let's get to the actual thing we were gonna watch. So, Steven Crowder, you would love to hear what he has to say? I'm gonna go ask him quick.
Hello?
Hey, Destiny, how's it going?
Great. How are you going?
I'm going fine. I'm going on a straight and narrow. I'm on God's path. Amen.
Cool.
Blessed be thy name. So, I heard you were talking about Israel Palestine.
I mean, a little bit.
What's your take generally?
It's really hard to have a general take. I don't know I wish that they could just like fucking all grow up and live happily together and stop trying to fuck each other over so much, but I don't know.
So your take is like a peace on earth, everybody get along, basically?
Yeah, please stop being so cringe.
Stop being cringe.
Just stop being cringe. Can't people just not be fucking cringe? Who cares where your particular holy man came from or your fucking families of generational bullshit? All right, fucking load up some old school RuneScape, make an account, go fucking farm, okay, or go to school, get a job, do some dumb shit. Be a citizen of the world, okay? Be a globalist. Be based, okay?
You know what? Maybe that's what they need. They need less cringe. So what factions do you think are cringe? You think Hamas is cringe? You think Islamic Jihad is cringe?
Ultra cringe.
Ultra?
Okay. Yes. However, the Israeli government also a little bit cringe.
Little bit.
A little bit cringe, yeah. And basically just all the people there are cringe.
What do you think of Benjamin Netanyahu, Destiny?
Well, he lost the elections, right? So he is out soon.
I wish I followed it as near as I could, but it's complicated. We don't know for sure what's gonna happen, but apparently, I think some Arab party. There's questions about Arab parties and what's gonna be happening going forward. I don't want to say anything definitive because I don't know for sure.
Okay, gotcha. My understanding is he's out. I mean, like he's obviously. I mean, like when you ask me, like, what is your opinion on Netanyahu? You're basically asking me, like, do I think does Israel have a right to kick all the Palestinians out of fucking Israel? It's kind of the question. I don't. It's really I don't know what the right answer is. I don't. I really don't. What do you think?
I mean, my position is. So the thing is, obviously, I've actually avoided for the last year and 5 months while I've been streaming to ever talk about Israel Palestine because I know that no matter what I say, I'm gonna get like angry. I'm gonna get like an angry reaction from somebody, and also like depending on what you say, and this is a legitimate concern for me, it can affect who exactly would be wanting to hire me going forward if I work in the foreign policy sphere, because this is an extremely divisive issue, and a lot of people make like
not divisive at all if you're in the U.S. If you're in the U.S., you toe the Israeli line 1,000,000%, and there are no other options. But go ahead.
I will just say for myself personally, I believe that, and I got some shit for calling them evictions, so I'll put evictions in air quotes. The evictions that are going on in East Jerusalem, I think they're pretty screwed up. I think that the large amount of force that was used against Palestinian protesters that were outside of the third holiest site in Islam was extremely disproportionate. And you can just look at the injury reports, like over 300,000, over 300 injured compared to like 3 Israeli security forces. I think maybe a dozen Israeli Jews.
It always is, by the way.
It's always is this.
Disproportionately, Israel is always able to kill way more Palestinians than I mean, like, again, it's just being descriptive. I'm not taking a side, but like on one end, you've got people from Gaza lobbing over these shit-ass rockets that are being intercepted by this fucking multi-billion-dollar anti-missile defense program. And then the retaliation for that is scrambling like fucking fighter jets to do these like precision airstrikes and shit on Gaza. Like,
I don't think the Hamas Air Force of balloons with grenades like taped to them.
Oh yeah, the balloons of the fire, where like I think only one of them even managed to strike like even. I think it was like a remotely populated village.
Yeah.
Did it? Oh, okay. I knew that one was like it like I think only one of those like found like any type of like valuable target. I say valuable target, but it was like a car in a town or something.
Yeah. I think that I think this moment showed a lot of weakness in Netanyahu due to the fact that when he banned access to the Temple Mount, which is it's like the same thing, but it's like for, I don't know how to say it, but it's like the same thing but for Jews. It's like a really important site for them. It's literally like the same location. There's been this
Mhm.
long-standing policy of Jews cannot pray at the it's complicated, but anyway, he banned like access to it on Jerusalem Day, which is the anniversary of the 1967 victory of Israel in
Mhm.
defense of the Israeli state, blah blah blah.
Yeah, which
And
is seen as, like, kind of like a big, like, buff, like, Israel citizen moment where, like, "Yeah, fuck everybody, like, we can do our shit." Like, I think it's considered, like, relatively antagonistic towards Palestinians that live in East Jerusalem.
extremely, because the thing is, a lot of these number one, the Israel Day marches are usually organized by pretty far right Israeli groups a lot of times,
Mhm.
and
Wow, no way.
they'll specifically choose to march through like pretty like heavily Palestinian communities in East Jerusalem,
Mhm.
and so it's
Yeah, well, now this time they wanted to march through the actual I don't remember the name of it, but the actual neighborhood where they were gonna do these evictions
yes,
at. They were
yes, it
planning
was
on going yeah.
extremely provocative,
Mhm.
and so the government basically said like, yeah, man, this is a little too much for us, and a lot of the far right allies that Benjamin Netanyahu helped get elected to Knesset basically turned around, started spitting in his face, like you are basically saying you are seceding, you are caving to terrorists. That's what you're doing
Mhm.
today. And so he got a massive L. Obviously, like another like Hamas's missile strikes, Islamic Jihad's missile strikes, any missile strikes, terrible, should be condemned. Uh, Obviously the Gaza, but again, the disproportionate level of force here is so overwhelming when you see like the missile. I think maybe one person might have died as of now. I saw one report showing that, but
Mhm.
but I before yesterday, it was one person was injured and was followed up by a IDF airstrike that I know it killed Hamas members, but it also ended up killing. The original reports from the Gaza Ministry of Health said 9 children out
Mhm.
of 20 was the original figure. I don't know if that number's been updated or not, but obviously, I don't know if this is a controversial take, but I think blowing up kids is bad. Um,
Kind of. To be fair on that, though, and this is something I've read about extension in the past because this gets thrown a lot. I'm pretty sure Hamas do actually stage shit outside of like schools and hospitals and stuff with the stated goal of like, listen, if they blow fucking hospitals and kids up, it makes our side look way better. Hamas is very intentional when they do that. Not to say that Israel should return fire and kill fucking
that's the
kids and
thing.
all that.
Like,
That's horrible.
I
But
understand that, but this is
mhm,
the thing for me is this justification could be used to justify basically like large scale fire bombing. Could be used to justify large scale bombing of a lot of places. For example, the Russians were very famous for during the Syrian war. For
mhm,
bombing hospitals and bombing civilians. If you look at death tolls from any respectable institution that's actually logging like how many deaths happened in the Syrian civil war, the
mhm,
overwhelming amount of deaths are due to the Syrian military, as in the Syrian Arab Army, and the Russian military bombing campaigns and indiscriminate attacks. And the defense they always use is, well, the terrorists, they use civilian shields, but then you
sure,
look at the footage and it's like they're just straight up bombing hospitals, right?
sure.
And so it's hard for me to just see like children blowing up and just hear the defense of like, well, you know that there was a terrorist behind that child, and take that for justification. I mean, I remember people dunking on Joe Biden like a few months ago when he did the strike in Syria, and as far as we know, it originally the reports was there was a different strike that he was going to do, but then called off once there were civilians in the vicinity, and everybody was laughing at him
Mhm.
like, "Oh, this is something that needs to be applauded," right? And then you fast forward to now, and we see the results of what happens when you don't do that. Is
Sure.
that when
Well,
for
we
because for
careful. We
me,
we're it's not the U.S.
no,
that's
not we,
doing this,
but
right?
okay,
Yeah.
I'm just talking about the general alliance. Yeah, I shouldn't say
Yeah, I
we,
understand. I understand.
but when the
I'm just
Israeli
saying.
government doesn't do that, that's the
Mhm.
result. Because for me,
Yeah.
a personal standard is if there's civilians in that vicinity, the general rule should be abort. That should be the general rule.
Yeah, kinda, but then obviously Hamas plays into that, right? So
I, yeah, Hamas does play into that. I mean,
mhm.
obviously, Hamas does play into that. So it's a hard. I'm just gonna stick by the general rule though that if you need to do your best, and when
You
you
need to
end
do
up
I
you
understand
need
that,
to do
but I'm
your
just saying
best, and
that,
when
like,
you
from
end up
a
bombing and killing civilians, ultimately a lot of that blame is at your feet.
sure, I understand that, but then on the other side, on the Israeli side, you literally have people that are lobbing rockets over into, like, your cities and stuff or attempting to. So, like
Yeah, but you also need to remember that these rockets, when you look at comparative damage to like Israeli strikes, are not at all comparable. When the amount
Yeah,
of
of course.
damage, the defenses that the Israeli government has made available. Now, there is a question of like, do they have to respond proportionably? No, but when you have the ability to choose if you can or how proportionate or how overwhelming your response is going to be, then I
Mhm.
think you can make that decision to we're not going to bomb this because there's civilian casualties, and when you fuck up
Sure,
and you
and
kill
I can
civilian
understand that.
casualty, that's on you.
Yeah, and I can understand that, but we have to keep in mind too that like imagine the like it's easy for us as U.S. people to sit and say this because I don't deal with any shit like this. I don't know where you live, but I don't have bombs shot at me ever. I don't think I've ever experienced it in my life. I think it's probably true for 99% of people listening. But like I can't imagine like how politically viable it would be to just like sit by and have like people lobbing rockets at you, and you're just like, well, we're not going to respond because we think that'd be the
Well,
wrong thing to
yeah,
do.
of
Like I feel
course.
like you'd be losing elections, and you just get
I understand a
farther and
response.
farther right leaning people that would just start taking office over and over again. Yeah.
I understand that there should be a response.
Mm-hmm.
Just like there should be a response to like any type of terror attack on the United States. But if that response ends up killing civilians, ultimately we have to place the blame somewhere, and the blame I
Sure.
think in large
Listen,
part has to go on the person who pulls the trigger
I
and ends up killing the
understand.
civilians.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It just doesn't work here, right? Like Hamas is going to exclusively be launching attacks out of this. So like your prescription is basically saying Israel should never respond.
I
Which
The thing is, I
maybe
believe
you can
I
make an
believe
argument because it's
I
not like Israel
believe
suffers much damage, but like
I believe that I do believe that there's other ways to respond than direct airstrikes.
like
For example,
how?
like Israel has one of the most intelligence and I was supposed to say intelligence services in the world. They have used like a lot of, for example, I think assassinations, something a lot more strategic, actual
Yeah, but doesn't
assassinations of
Israel,
Hamas
even when
leadership.
Israel does like the targeted, fuck, I wish I could remember this. I want to say this happened, it was a big deal a while ago. Didn't Israel like drone strike like a guy getting out of a car in, was it Gaza or the West Bank? And then like, I think like one civilian died during this, but I want to say it was a relatively high ranking target, but like, even in that, people were like incredibly critical of, um, it might have been in Iran though, not in Palestine. But like even when the targeted attacks are used, one, these are a lot harder to set up, I would imagine, and probably take a lot more time. Um, and then yeah, I don't know. It's a I like I want to agree that like civilians should always be left alone, but like just I think that like the real world application, I think it's
Well,
like
the
a
thing is,
lot more
I
messy. I think it's like
I
really
understand
difficult.
that like we understand that civilians
Mm-hmm.
are like in war, civilians die. That is a thing that happens, right? That's why war should generally be avoided. The
Sure.
problem is, to be able to hand wave civilian casualties under the definition, well, our opponents don't care about civilians and they use them as shields, leads to basically the justification where you can basically stand there and any amount of civilian casualties can basically be justified under the pretense that, well, our opponents are bad guys, it's all of our opponents' fault. And if you look at the justification they're doing right now, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
It's all Hamas, fuck Hamas, it's their fault. Their fault that civilians are dying. And the thing is, this justification has been extended to justify basically everything. A great example would be when there was protests at the border or at the gates, and Israeli snipers would literally shoot Palestinian children. They would say it was Hamas that organized it. It was Fatah that organized it. It was Palestinian Islamic Jihad that organized it. Therefore, they organized the protest. They organized the stone throwing. Therefore, it's their fault, even though they're the one who sniped a child in the head or ended up crippling people and shooting them in the legs. They would use that justification to justify any amount of force because the opponents they're working with are perfectly willing to put Palestinians in the firing line.
Sure,
That
but I mean, like, so, like, a very pro-Zionist or whatever, like, explanation might be that with enough pressure applied, maybe the Palestinian people throw out Hamas.
I would my response would just be, why hasn't it worked? Because there's obviously, I mean, if we look at the Egyptian and Israel-backed blockade, we look at the
Mhm.
bombing campaign, we look at the large-scale expansion of Israeli settlements, we look at everything that's happened. All it's really done a lot of times, in my opinion, is pushed the Palestinian people closer into the arms of these organizations. Because what they ultimately can say is, hey, remember how we told you how we can't negotiate with Israel? You remember how we told you in our charter how evil this group is and that group is?
Mhm.
Boom, there's the evidence right there. 9 dead kids.
Yeah, of course, people play this up all the time, right? People in Syria were doing this as well, right? With the chemical weapon attacks and everything too, for like recruiting people to either side, right? Whether you were blaming Assad for it or any of the more moderate rebel groups, yeah. Um, I don't know what I understand. I'm empathetic to your point. I'm just not comfortable telling a country like, listen, I know people are throwing rockets at you, but you literally just need to sit there and like do nothing about it and live with it. Like I think it's a really rough. I think it's a really hard situation.
I'm of course this is the reason why it's Israel Palestine is Italy has its own almost its own standard of complicated issues because it is an extremely complicated issue. My problem is I just want to be like I think we need to be careful when we talk about like specifically the civilian casualties that happen here because we need to first acknowledge how disproportionate it is. It's the same reason why I think Andrew Yang is getting a lot of shit right now. There is nothing wrong with what Andrew Yang said. Period.
Yeah,
There's nothing
and
wrong
to be
with what he
clear,
said.
Andrew Yang is probably getting a lot of shit online. If I had to guess, though, I think his take in New York is probably
oh no, he's gonna be
safe.
like the thing is in New York City, it means literally nothing. Number one, it's a mayoral race, foreign policy. Nobody's really gonna care, and nobody cares about foreign policy really a lot of times on the national level, and you're gonna get them to care on the mayoral level. And number two, New York City has an extremely powerful when I say powerful I mean like they're a good voting bloc Jewish community who cares about Israel, and so I don't think that is really going to have a huge effect at all, and I think all the people thinking this is going to crash his campaign are wrong. That being said, the problem with the statement was of course the lack of perspective on the totality of the situation of leaving out the protests, leaving out the forced evictions, leaving leaving out all this other scenarios, all the dead Palestinians and the children and everything else, leaving that out and just saying, oh, this is terrible, let me condemn this. It doesn't give an entire perspective. For an example, it would be like it's like when you'll see a lot of times people condemning like this rioting is terrible, this rioting is terrible, this rioting is terrible, and then like get quiet when January 6th came around and then turned right back again to the rioting is terrible from the left, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're leaving out a huge chunk of the violence.
Yeah, and even the U.S. State Department, is similar, where it's like the
oh my God,
Palestinian attacks, or what?
Did you see the State Department official getting grilled on this?
Well,
on the idea of Palestinian self-defense?
I saw that, but to be fair, I wouldn't expect him to give any other answer on anything because, and you know what? I'm actually so much more empathetic now, having been a streamer, because I see how clip chimped everything gets, and reporters are truly the original clip chimpers, okay? Because you're trying to get like a quote from this guy, basically saying, because they're asking him over again, do you think that states have a right to self-defense? And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, I think any state has a right to, we agree generally. Do you think that? Wait, but do you mean only states, or do you? Because Palestine
was the original question state, or was it Israel has a right to self-defense? And then he said states, and then he said. And then he responded to the
I think that in general he was saying it, but he wasn't trying to right. They're looking for like a quote from him, right? But the obvious answer is that the United States isn't going to stake out like a huge position on Palestine because Israel isn't willing to stake out like a huge position on Palestine. Real quick, what we were saying before though is that like the problem with the State Department is coming out really strong against the against like Hamas's attacks into Israel. You talking about leaving out context is kind of shitty when you ignore the fact that like Palestinians like constantly have like an existential crisis in East Jerusalem is like a shitty thing for the State Department to just kind of leave that out, because it makes it look like the Hamas attacks are like out of nowhere, like, oh well, they're them wacky Palestinians again just bombing Israel for no reason.
Yeah, because the thing is, the reason why that question was so interesting, right, is because when you accidentally wrote something else here. Okay. The thing is, when anytime like something happens with Israel Palestine and any missile ever goes over, the first thing you hear is right to self-defense, right? Right to self-defense is usually the immediate thing you're going to hear, that the state of Israel has the right to defend itself. But then with that logic, that makes sense, but wouldn't that same logic apply the other way? And I don't think a lot of people, and I don't even blame a lot of people for having thought about this, because this is something even I haven't probably put forward to myself, because it's just not something I hear a lot. It's not a narrative that I hear questioned. Well, okay. Well, then do Palestinians have a right to self-defense? And what does a right to self-defense for Palestinians look like? Is that armed militia groups? Is that a response to an airstrike? Like, what exactly does that mean?
It's more complicated because Israeli aggression against Palestinians is more subtle than Hamas's like counterattacks, right? Like, because it seems weird to say like you should be able to violently defend yourself from evictions, right? Is that right? Like, it's a lot more muddied. Whereas on the Israeli side, they're like, look, they're launching rockets at us. Like, fuck them, right? So like
Yeah.
Israelis have like the better optic or
People don't see the
rhetorical win.
tension turning slowly up on one side, like a broiler, until
Mhm.
boom, there's an explosion, and that's the missile strikes that ends up hitting a car or terrorizing the city, and then a response that's a military response that's much more destructive, much more deadly, kills a lot more people, ends up killing kids, and
Yeah.
if anything, that just makes the situation, of course, worse. And then you have like a whole bunch of missile strikes, and then groups like Islamic Jihad or Hamas then can turn to the crowd and say, see how right we were? See, we're the only ones fighting them? Out of everybody else, all these other groups, all the political solution, Abbas and Fatah, look, they're failing. There's no political solution to this. And then they're able to point to their charter, their principles, and say, see, we're the solution.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the thing is, it was just really interesting to see that posed to a United States official, because you think like I would think the answer should be, of course, Palestinians have a right to self-defense.
You can't say that. No, because that's going to be used for propaganda. Like, oh, look, even the U.S. State Department believes we have a right to self-defense, right? He could never answer the question that way.
Well, the thing is, then the problem is, if you say that could be used for propaganda, the fact that the State Department says Israel's right to self-defense to Palestinians, like that right there, it's propaganda in and of itself. Being able to say
the U.S. supports Israel, so of course the U.S. is going to have that position always, right?
Yeah, I don't feel
Israel is literally like the most safe political opinion you can have in U.S. politics, whether you're left or right. Like,
yeah, I don't feel like it's extremely I don't feel it's extremely difficult to just say, yeah, I believe all people have a right to self-defense. Now, wait, come on. Now you could follow that up by saying, what that looks like is different, or you could say something along the lines of what that means. Of course, we might not agree, or something along those lines, but you can say, of course, all people have a right to self-defense. All nations have a right to self-defense.
The headlines tomorrow read, U.S. State Department official agrees Palestine has a right to self-defense. Like, that's exactly, like, he could never give an answer like that. That's literally what that guy is fishing for, because that's the headline that he wants for tomorrow. So it's obvious that the State Department guy is going to be trying to weasel around that as much as possible.
I would say that, of course, yeah, I think some groups is going to take that in the wrong way, but I also think it is the correct statement to say. I do think it is the right thing to say, even if it comes.
I mean, like, morally and everything, yeah, obviously, of course it is. Palestinians have a right to defend themselves, but I'm just saying that,
I guess I wasn't really talking about like I wasn't really talking about the PR. I was more talking about like what is the morally correct thing to say. If we're talking PR, you there? Hello? Oh. This was a Fatah operation the whole time. Muhammad Abbas, operation complete.
Hello, Dylan.
Hey, Jade. How's it going?
It's going okay. How about you?
Going good. What do you think about the Palestine-Israel thing going on?
I think... Wait, what's going on right now?
A lot of stuff.
Is it the same old? Or is it...
Same old?
No,
the same old.
Wait, because, like, they got, like, beef for a little bit, right?
Yeah, they got beef. They
Okay.
Palestine, Israel do got beef, yeah.
Okay, so is there anything, like, funky happening with the situation?
Funky?
Recently?
Like, as in, like, ooh, funky! Like dancing? Or what do you mean, like,
No,
like funky smelly?
like Monka W.
Monka Wing? Yeah, there's a lot of stuff Monka W right now, Jade.
Okay, is it with the Israeli government?
Is it with the Israeli government? Yes, it has to do with the Israeli government and West Jerusalem and forced evictions of people from their homes and police brutalizing protesters outside the third holiest site in Islam, and missile strikes from Hamas and airstrikes from the Israeli government.
Oh my gosh, on their people?
Yep.
Whoa. Oh my gosh, that's not good.
No, it isn't.
Wait. Are they allowed to do that?
Who?
Like the government.
Like, is Israel allowed to strike?
No, just like, I feel like that's very unethical.
It is.
That's like, don't they have like a moral compass they check?
Well, unethical depends on how you define it. This situation is really complicated. Jesus fuck.
Nah, I think Jade's pretty based here, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was Muhammad Abbas. He was shutting you down, Destiny.
Gotcha.
I understand like the whole PR routes of it. I understand that, but I still think it is also important to, like, if somebody says something morally wrong, as somebody who isn't in the position where I have to make this mistake, I can like say this is why what this person said is wrong, right? This is why they do have a right to self-defense.
Okay. But the U.S. acknowledging that would be the U.S. basically saying that like Israel's entire policy related to East Jerusalem is unethical and immoral, which would be.
I don't think it's necessarily saying that it's entirely immoral just to say that they have a right to self-defense. Because, example, they could say it has
the right to self-defense against what?
Yeah, the question would be against what, and somebody could just say general aggression, or they could say something like that. Like,
but this isn't about general aggression.
Yeah, somebody could. Yeah, the thing is, the question would then, of course, be narrowed down to is this apply in self-defense, and that's when the United States would have to give a position on whether like no, this does not apply in self-defense. But then the United States would have to
force itself to acknowledge whether what Israel was doing is right or wrong, and I imagine that for purposes like the U.S. probably wants to remain agnostic on the East Jerusalem stuff.
I think the Biden administration wants to, but I don't want them to. That's my position.
Sure, I understand you don't want them to, yeah, but like even if you didn't want them to, then what is the correct?
The thing is, my take would be, of course, they have a right to self-defense. I don't think missile strikes from Hamas on civilians is self-defense.
You don't think? Well, what else are they supposed to do?
Past that point, then the question would be about like legitimate military conflict under international law and the striking of like actual, like, of course, the statements from the United States should not be like, well, technically, legally speaking, and what's morally speaking, that would be the combat with actual like military forces. So that would be compact with the IDF. Now, of course, the United States official.
I'm asking more specifically, what are people in East Jerusalem? What are the Palestinians supposed to do? What is their proper response if not military strikes?
The proper, okay, to be
because from a Palestinian
I
perspective,
specifically said,
fucked, right?
Yeah, okay, from a Palestinian perspective, they are screwed either way, and that's why protests, large-scale civil disobedience, stuff like that is stuff I would push towards. The thing is,
well, but hold on, to be clear,
you're asking me right now to solve the Israel Palestine crisis.
This is why Hamas struck. They already were protesting, and they're getting killed during the protests.
I know.
By cops, by IDF cops and everything, right?
The thing is, I would point towards the idea of, like, number one, you do not kill civilians in response to killing civilians. That's bad. Number two, I would point to the large-scale, like, effectiveness in comparison.
Stop, hold on. I got it, hold on. I need you're giving me very idealistic answers, okay? The reality is that every answer that you're giving me is going to be a U.S. talking point in favor of Israel, right? Because you and I both know the Palestinians do not have the capacity to strike Israeli military targets, right? They can't protest because they do that and they already get killed by the IDF, right? So it seems like from a Palestinian's perspective, you've got two options. Either get the fuck out of East Jerusalem and just cede all the territory and then wait and then watch as Israel slowly encroaches on all of your presence in the West Bank and all of it goes away because bureaucratically Israel has the upper hand. Or two, you support a quasi-terrorist organization like Hamas and hope that through military efforts and intervention, you get enough international focus on your issue that maybe you can start to make some real political progress in terms of getting some type of situation going on in East Jerusalem. But just because I appreciate your kind of more pacifist approach, but that only benefits Israel, right?
It's, again, I don't think I'm advocating back. Okay, let me be very clear. The reason why I'm being very careful with my words is, I think, obvious. Like, I just want to make sure I don't say anything stupid because this is a very, very important issue, and I don't comment on it a lot for that reason. And number two, if I had the solution to the crisis, I'd be making a lot more money, right? Obviously, like, this is one of the most complicated issues. So the best I can do is like give suggestions and like my general takes. And I would say that I believe that the most effective tool of resistance is the ability to get international attention on what's going on and international scrutiny on what's going on. Now people can say,
how do you do that?
Now, how do you do that? I would say,
here's a question. How many people around the world knew that Palestinians were being evicted from East Jerusalem until these attacks happened? My guess would be less than 1% of US citizens, right? Like,
no, wait, we're messing up the timeline. So the timeline was the evictions occurred, the protests occurred outside the third holiest site in Islam. Then the Israeli government responded violently towards the protesters, injuring 300. That is when international attention happened. That was followed up by Hamas missile strikes. And I think Islamic Jihad, I'd have to go back and check. So the international attention turned to them once the Israeli government was beating Palestinian protesters outside the mosque, right? Which for Israel would be the Temple Mount, right? In that area, general area, and in the old city. That violence in the old city of Jerusalem is what originally got that attention. This was due to Palestinian protesters recording the events and due to activists getting the attention out there by like trying to route this to news stations, local reporters on the ground. That was originally what happened. Not a single missile strike at that point had occurred, showing, in my opinion, that you can get attention from the international community without lobbying missiles at civilians.
Sure. I mean, I want to agree with you, and I like your take, and I'd even like support it, I guess. But I think that take,
then you could just agree with me.
What?
Then you could just say I agree, Dylan.
Well, the problem that I think people would have is that take is a future where Palestine is eliminated. The take that you're giving right now. Israel will very slowly continue to encroach on the little territory that Palestine has. Nobody really gives a fuck about Palestine. Nobody's like winning or losing elections based on their point in Palestine. Israel has the military.
The elections are also being delayed by Mohammed Abbas and Fatah.
Sure. I'm just saying that like the path that you're on right now for what you're saying, they should just peacefully protest and blah, blah, blah. Maybe a few citizens get killed by some IDF forces every now and then. Eventually, Israel will rout all the Palestinians out of Jerusalem. They will have a stronger claim to Jerusalem. They will take it over completely, and Palestine will be.
Yeah, and this is why I would combine this with the moving of the United States Embassy out of Jerusalem and stuff like that, using that as leverage to get people to the negotiating table, stuff like that. Now,
yeah,
this is things.
Trump really fucked everything.
Yeah, he really fucked it majorly. He gave them so much leverage for literally nothing. We got nothing out of that. There was no concession on anything, so we just gave them a huge leverage boost, and then followed that up by them normalizing relations by all these states.
A religious cult? A religious cult. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I thought I was muted. Oh my god, I really. I'm so sorry.
Did Jade just call Judaism a religious cult? That's a little weird.
Maybe.
Oh.
That also complicates things. I don't know what the U.S. does in terms of that because I think it benefits the U.S. politically to not have a strong stance on what Israel does, so that we can be like, oh well, they're crazy stepchild sometimes. What are you going to do? But now with the moving of that embassy to Jerusalem, I don't think you can undo that, right? Without making a very strong statement on Palestinian existence in Jerusalem. And yeah, Trump. Fuck.
That's why I think that's why I'd rather, instead of like immediately doing that, it'd be something like, hey, we want you to move on this. If you don't, we are willing to move on the previous thing we've given you. We gave you something, we expect something in return in negotiations. Now, of course, again, the problem with all these recommendations that I could give, like, or this is a solution or this is a possible solution, before I comment on that, you do acknowledge, though, that a military response from Palestine also ends with the elimination of Palestine under your framework. Like, what are they going to do? Like, push Israel into the sea? That's not possible.
Well, no, I think if I had to guess, right, with the way that Hamas operates, I think the goal is that once you drum up like enough attacks and enough Palestinians are killed, that maybe you get enough international focus on the area that there does become international pressure on the United States to pressure Israel to chill the fuck out.
But then the problem is that with the missile strikes, that removes pressure, because then the Israeli government can push attention towards those missile strikes and the terror that they induce to say, look, these are terror groups. Look at the suicide bombings. Look at this. Look at that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's a gambit. I think the thing that we disagree right now, though, is that, or what, maybe we disagree, maybe we don't. The path that we're on right now leads to Palestinians being gone. Assuming there's not a radical departure right now, Palestinians are on the way out. So I can understand them trying to take more radical measures to make sure that doesn't happen.
I agree. It's just I don't see there's not a military solution to the conflict.
Bogged emote.
Jade, you did it again.
I'm so sorry. I'm gonna leave. I'll be right back. One sec. How do I leave?
Hit the hang up button.
Nice.
Oh.
So I see the Palestinians. I acknowledge them as being in a pretty desperate position where, everything you're saying might be right. Maybe Hamas functions in such a way that people become unsympathetic towards the cause, right? We've seen in the U.S., for instance, that when
I don't
innocent
think the
protesters are
sympathy
killed
is
by the
gonna.
police,
I don't think this.
that it's good for like the protesters, but when they start getting violent, it's bad, right? And that might carry through. That might be the case. But I mean, like what do you do? Like they're in a pretty desperately fucked situation, is all I'm saying, right?
Yeah,
Not
like
approving or disapproving of violence.
I agree that the thing is I agree that they're in a desperately fucked situation. And the thing is, like, I agree that right now, like, the solution, like, definitely after Trump's move of the embassy, that Palestine doesn't have many options on the table besides basically almost complete submission to the Israeli state, which would mean that all of their priorities would be thrown under the bus when it comes to the illegal Israeli settlements in the West Bank, when it comes to the idea of right of return, when it comes to East Jerusalem and the idea of Jerusalem being a capital for Palestinians, when it comes to who would have security and control over Palestinian territory, because I believe like Israel has control of like what 40% of the West Bank. Like there's so much, not to mention like how much influence the Mossad has over Palestinian territory and stuff like that. So there's so many priorities that are currently under the bus that they don't want to be thrown under the bus. The question is how to get them on the right track. And I mean, I can like give suggestions of stuff I think Joe Biden could do. I could give suggestions of stuff that I think the Israeli government should do. The problem is a lot of these suggestions work against the interests or are huge risks that I don't think are politically viable for the people involved. So I like the best we can do is try to pressure them to do these things or make it so it'd be politically unviable not to take certain moves, right? For example, Joe Biden speaking up on this, because the three paths towards a solution here is through Israel, America, and like Jordan, because Jordan has immense influence over only like the Temple Mount, but also like negotiations due to the large amount of Palestinians who are refugees in Jordan and how much influence the Jordanian king has had historically. But the Jordanian king does not have a good relationship with an Israeli government, which right now is non-existent after multiple rounds of elections, which basically is just like playing patty cake with who's going to be in power. So the Israeli government's kind of like, currently in its own crisis. So that's not going to like be the government that brings about the change right now needed to bring a solution to this decades-old issue. In the United States right now, I mean, Joe Biden could make the historic move of doing something on this, but his priorities right now is COVID response, and he wants to make a pivot to Asia. He wants to make a pivot to Asia.
Here's a question. So, because we act like, so I don't actually think the issue is that complicated, okay? I think that it's actually pretty simple. But the problem is that the answer is not simple. So the issue is quite simple, I think. You have two completely different groups of people that want access to one land, right? Like that's the issue. Now, it's complicated insofar as like, how do we make it work? Because the answer is like diametrically opposed to reality. It seems like what both sides want isn't achievable. So you keep saying that like, well, I think it'd be cool if the US could just pressure Israel to do the right thing. What is the right thing though? I'm curious in terms of what you mean by that, because there are strong arguments on both sides for why, for instance, like a two-state solution, like Israel is not going to be happy with a two-state solution, depending on democratically what that means for Palestinians moving in, right? So how do you even begin to figure out like what the right answer is there? I think that the problem is you just have like, these are just contradictory desires. Like I don't think both can be fulfilled in this reality.
Well, yeah, that's the thing is the actual idea of compromise would have to be a real, because the thing is,
but what is compromise?
Well, you gotta let me finish the sentence here. So the thing is, I understand. Compromise on this would be like, of course, like Israel, like for example, like being like, okay, let me just think of something random. Like, well, you know what? Maybe we will keep some Israeli settlements if we talk about and favor right of return. That would be a compromise. The problem is, of course, Israelis are living in the territory formerly held by Palestinians who were displaced internally and externally in places like Egypt, Jordan, other places, and that's why this negotiation it doesn't seem currently viable, because the leverage is all held by Israel. They have no reason to ever even like listen to that type of a concern, right? And
do you think that Israelis?
Oh, Lumi, thanks so much for the raid. Sorry.
Do you think that Israeli citizens might have some concern over forfeiting a large amount of influence to Palestinians, like joining them under one nation?
You know what? I can't really give you a. I mean, I would assume so, but I can't give you really a solid answer. I don't have polling.
Yeah,
on
because I
that.
think that's probably an issue that that's probably, I would guess, is probably a pretty central issue to a lot of Israeli citizens. Is like, I don't want to share a government with these people. Like, there's a sizable portion of these people that want to see like Jewish people eradicated from the planet. I don't want to give these people any say in my government. To be clear, I'm saying this for a millionth time, even though it doesn't fucking matter. I'm not saying one side is right or wrong in this, but I think that both sides can have like pretty valid claims to like feeling like certain like different solutions that might benefit one side would severely fuck over their side.
The thing is, like, there's a few different models of like what is the future. One of them would be, of course, like the idea of there's one state, it's the Israeli state, but everybody has citizenship. Because right now, if you're a Palestinian, if you're a Palestinian in, say, West Jerusalem, you don't automatically actually vote in Israeli elections. You could apply for the citizen. Now, if you're an Israeli Jew, the conversation might be a little bit different, in like a different part of Jerusalem. But if you're Palestinian in East Jerusalem, you actually have to go through this complicated backdoor, like weird, like do a triple flip to like become a citizen to then vote in Israeli elections. If you start giving a lot of people like the idea of a one state, you would have to give a lot of people the right to vote and give a lot of people participation in government. But I would say that the Israeli far right really doesn't like the idea of Arab parties, like Palestinian Arab parties, growing in strength, growing in power, growing in representation. Yeah. This is something that scares them. For a lot of people, the idea of even thinking of voting or working with Palestinian Arab parties is disgusting to them. Gross to them.
Yeah, it's like Republicans when they think of like seating any type of like gun right stuff, where you're like, oh, maybe we should have background checks. Like, you want background checks today, tomorrow you're taking all of our guns, right? Like, you don't want to cede any ground because you're worried about
recently the whole idea that Palestinian Arab parties might be part of the coalition that takes out Netanyahu has been something that's really pissed off the Israeli far right. In fact, that was a big motivating factor for them voting for Bibi's party, was because they didn't want to see Palestinian Arabs in government. They didn't want to see them in power. So that's one problem. But then, of course, when you talk about the two-state solution and the problems that come with the two-state solution, we talk about and this is just true under international law, the illegal Israeli settlements in the West Bank. You talk about the blockade in the Gaza Strip. You talk about Fatah and Hamas having completely different interests in the Israeli government. You talk about right of return and what that actually looks like. You talk about the continued expansion. Because the thing is, it's not just like Israeli settlements are this like kind of block thing, like this thing that is like this block in Palestine. It is an expanding thing, as we can see from what's going on in Palestinian neighborhoods in West Jerusalem. So there's so many different factors involved. That's why, like, while the official position of the United States and of many governments is a two-state solution, how to reach that two-state solution ever since the Oslo Accords has been just like basically an ultimate limbo. Mm-hmm. And I wish I had an answer to that. If I did, again, I'd be much wealthier.
What's up?
Maybe we can give them both like separate Rust servers.
Yeah.
Are you guys like debating?
Talking Israel Palestine.
Oh, how'd your session 0 go?
Oh, it went well. I rolled really well.
Good job. Do you have any 18s?
I do. One.
What
we got an 18 in intellect.
Wow.
Kind of like real life, you know.
So, Moon, what's your take on Israel Palestine? Everybody's dying to know.
Both should be under the United States control. Everyone should be under the United States control. True and based.
Holy shit! The U.S. should just annex all of it. That would be actually be based as fuck.
Yep.
You're now U.S. states. True.
What are they gonna do? Say no?
Exactly. Based in U.S. pilled. I like it, Moon. Good one. The U.S. should move their embassy to Jerusalem. Israelis are celebrating, and then the U.S. actually just builds the embassy like halfway between like the Palestinian and the Israeli controlled territory, which serves them both. There you go. That's the solution.
That's it.
It's like
I'm
cut
just
down the
figuring it out.
middle. Like one side is the Palestinian embassy, the other side is like the Israeli embassy. They've got like different
Exactly.
color coding patterns, different ceilings, different floors.
Yeah, true. I wish
The
people
reason
could
my
just be
Terraria is running like shit.
less cringe and just not fight so much. That's all I want, Dylan.
Is that what you want?
Just be less cringe, please.
Or just fight
less
more
cringe?
and figure it out.
Oh, really? So you support the violence, Mr. Mooten? Is that what you're saying?
I do not support any violence.
Okay, because that's kind of what you just said. So I
Yeah,
just want to
well,
get a clear statement on
not
that.
what
You
I said.
support the violence and yeah?
No, I support no violence.
Oh. So you think that the Palestinians should just sit and lose all their land to the Israelis?
I think they shouldn't fight.
If the settlements are illegal, wouldn't any use of force to get them out be self-defense? Well, just because something's breaking the law doesn't mean you use like lethal or like violent force in order to like enforce
Wait.
that
Who's
law.
breaking the law? Who did that person say?
The settlements in the West Bank are illegal.
Which, the Israeli ones or the Palestinian ones?
The Israeli ones.
Okay, gotcha. According to international, yeah.
Yeah.
You have to be careful because the law stuff can be crafted by who's in power too, and that gets
Yeah.
wielded in weird
Laws
ways
also
too.
don't
Like,
dictate morality, and yeah.
sure, because technically, like Israel is going to argue that well, there are neighborhoods in the East Jerusalem area that are violating our laws, but obviously the Israeli government is trying to craft those in such a way that they can bully Palestinians out. Also, something that I really like is people on Twitch, especially in leftist spheres, hate me so fucking much. It's so funny that like. I know it's not on you particularly, but your chat hates me so fucking much that while I'm giving like all these justifications for Palestine, they're like simping for Israel because they're so fucking desperate to disagree with everything I'm saying. Is really funny to me. Sorry, okay, I'm done.
Why you have to be mad, Stephen?
I don't know.
Game. I'm
So-
loading in.
Stephen was a Mossad agent the whole time.
Bro,
Prove it.
what do you mean by that, man?
Shut up.
When his family fled Cuba, they actually did a detour and head to Israel first. And when Stephen Bunnell II was born, he trained in Mossad training camps, so he could be an internet warrior for the Israeli state.
Exactly.
Have you killed the queen bee?
Probably not. I've just been building all our fishing spots. I think I've got most of them built. We have a Sky Lake one. I don't know if you can tell or if people told you how to fish, the difference between like caverns and underground.
Mm-hmm.
I have if you
On
go
the
to
right
the fish
side, I
thing,
see. Yeah.
there's usually like a little thing you can step up, so it'll just change the biome you're in if you're in the caverns or the underground. Yeah.
Hey, Mooten,
What's up?
what's that? You know that space game you play? Is it like FTR or something?
FTL? Fast and
FTL?
Light?
Yeah, man. You should stop.
I haven't been
Why?
playing that for like a week.
What's wrong with FTL? The game is awesome.
No, it's good. It's just Mooten isn't.
No,
What
I
the
beat it.
fuck?
I
beat it.
I beat
How many,
beat
times-
it?
how many
I'm
FTL
done
runs
with
have
it.
you beaten?
How many FTL runs have you done?
A million, a zillion actually.
Yeah, that's what we
and
thought.
you haven't beat a single one.
I've beaten them
Damn.
all. Okay, I've never lost. Champion.
Nice try. Nice try.
But you haven't been a hard run yet, though, Mooten.
Oh, I haven't. No.
Damn.
That's right.
Because he's
I
soft.
could race that game. We could start tomorrow. See who can beat a hard run first. I would
Yeah,
definitely
you
crush
probably
you.
just get lucky.
Oh,
you did
yeah,
before.
lucky, huh?
Yeah.
Cringe.
Everyone knows I'm unlucky. Wacky devs. Who's this guy in a hole? Oh, is Jade on the server?
Do you think,
Yeah.
Mooten, that maybe if you like stopped eating like cold ravioli, right? Then
Uh-huh.
with the raviolis that are cold in the middle, then the brain rot would stop, so you get better at video games.
Wait, do you eat cold ravioli?
Yeah,
do
he
not
admitted
eat
it.
cold
He admitted it.
ravioli.
You admitted that
I
you
said
like
I have-
raviolis
I
in the
have
middle
in
of
the past.
cold, and
I
you
have
said
Oh, wait,
fine.
we
You
watched
said you
this
liked
clip.
it.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
my
you
god.
like it.
Wait, why are you saying yeah? I've done this one time. It's not like it's not a common occurrence. I think I did this when I was like 15.
Don't look at me to shit on him, Dylan. There's nothing wrong with cold ravioli.
Fuck you, Lycan.
There is something wrong with cold ravioli.
I mean, it's not as good as hot ravioli, but it's not that bad.
All
pretty bad.
disgust me.
You want to know what
Oh,
else is really
terrible.
bad? I'm gonna come out and say it. Okay. Pizza,
White people.
that's cold is just not good.
Oh, you're
That's
so
wrong.
fucking wrong.
Cold
wrong.
pizza is just gross. You guys are
Sometimes
just
cold pizza is
disgusting.
better than hot pizza.
I'm
I
gonna
think-
drop. Here comes the nuclear take. The only good cold pizza are pizza Lunchables, baby. That's it.
Oh, those are very
Amen.
good. Those
Now
are very good.
I've given the absolute base take.
Those
no one
taste
can
like
disagree.
nostalgia.
Cold
That's-
pizza that oh god, it's just disgusting.
I think it depends on the topping. I don't know.
No. doesn't. Depends on the bread and the
It
sauce.
depends on the bread and sauce. True.
Does it? Oh,
Yeah, that's all it is.
I'm still 20, man. I my palate has yet to completely develop.
Why do you have a fucking bunny?
Will you want to see
Furry?
why? Watch this. Oh, yeah. Mom said that I fuck like a rabbit, so I thought I'd go ahead and ride one.
Yeah, quick and you're done. 3 seconds. That's what you
What?
meant. Suck boy.
What?
Tell Melina to
What?
quiet down, or
That
else.
wasn't Melina. That was Jade. Are you okay, Moon?
Jade
What's
is
wrong?
muted. What do you mean?
I don't know who was screaming in the background. That wasn't in my background.
It was.
It was not.
Oh, you expect me to believe Lycan has a woman in his background? Yeah, no thanks.
Oh.
What do you mean by that, Moon?
Yeah, what did you mean by that, Moon?
I just fucking destroyed him.
Would it be bad if Lycan was gay, Mooten?
No, there'd be nothing wrong with that.
No,
nothing
Moon is
wrong
just
with
doing
it?
his toxic masculinity thing again.
Steven, the only thing toxic is you on the Rift, okay?
You know, Mooten, when I came out, you know, I knew I would face adversity, but I didn't think I'd face it from you.
Tell him
He
off,
was
Moon.
so-
Tell him what you really think about it.
What do you really think about me, Mooten? Just say it. Call me a
Oh,
queer.
you
Do
should
it.
have seen. You should have been here last night. Me and Mr. Moon were actually we were doing really good political discussions.
Oh, you should have seen what Steve. Yeah, you should have seen what he said on the Rift. True. He had some.
We
he had
found a
some
new
interesting takes.
hack, a new cheat code to get some of these losers off of our server. Anyway,
So-
what?
I was gonna try to make a right of return joke on the Rift, but couldn't think of it.
Man, we lost some unbelievable games yesterday.
We played. I think we
did.
played
were playing
really well.
We
almost
were tired,
all
but we were
night.
playing well.
Like unbelievably. We hard carried games we lost, games we won. It was insane, and
We
we
were
just had
destroyed.
some
Are you guys
certain
talking about
types of
League?
people. Yes.
Oh, okay, bye. Well, that's enough for me. Okay, I'll stay there for most conversations. They start talking about League of Legends, okay? I'm good. I'm done. Nope. Not even gonna try. No. I refuse to support League of Legends or any League of Legends posting or anything like that. Okay? Nothing. Fuck that shit. Disgusting. It's degenerate.